So today we're going to be looking at the Battle of Nicopolis. So let's get to it, shall we?
2 years after initially declaring the anti-Ottoman crusade, King Sigismund of Hungary was finally ready to face the forces of the Thunderbolt. During the late summer of 1396, the Crusader army paraded out of Buda and began their march south alongside the left bank of the Danube. Knowing that he could not supply his large army in one spot for any length of time, the Hungarian king opted for a more mobile solution, the preemptive invasion of Ottoman Bulgaria. This would be the first phase of his anti-Ottoman crusade, as re-establishing Christian rule in the region would serve as a buffer to his kingdom against Ottoman aggression. After taking Bulgaria, the Crusaders likely planned to move further south and lift the blockade of Constantinople. Alongside the main Crusader contingent heading south, a smaller eastern contingent was sent through Transylvania into Wallachia to restore Mircea I to his throne. Capturing the region would give Sigismund control over the northern bank of the Danube, which would play an essential role in his future invasion of Ottoman Bulgaria. Meanwhile, the Crusader fleet...
Okay, so Sigismund is the leader of this coalition crusade against the Ottomans, and, it seems like he has a great and a very grand army at his disposal. And it seems like so far his idea is get Mircea in control of Wallachia again. Wallachia immediately joins back into the fold, and take Bulgaria and quickly just drive the Ottomans out. Not a bad start, like pretty good. And we'll see if Mircea is successful. I mean, I trust Mircea. Like, he impressed me a lot against his battle against Bayezid. He actually gave Bayezid 2 defeats, so Mircea, hopefully he can pull that off. And again, there is a bit of self-interest involved. Sigismund obviously being the next closest big power to the Ottomans, obviously wants to create buffers, against the Ottomans, so there is a bit of, okay, this will benefit me in the long run, but, and it seems like right now he's about to explain that while this is going on, there's going to be a naval assault, or naval operations at the exact same time, which could easily divide the Ottomans' attention, so we'll see.
Supplied by Genoa, Venice and the Knights Hospitaller, had begun their naval operations in the Aegean Sea, resulting in the harassment of Ottoman shipping in the region. In addition to these developments, the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits were also blocked by the Crusader navy, thus permanently cutting off Bayezid from his Anatolian holdings. After
Holy crap, yeah, they are performing a huge operation here, man. Like, they're moving in unison, and I think the biggest problem is definitely the naval aspects. The Ottomans, they just said last video that their navy was still in its infancy, so they gotta probably, try to get that up if they want to, help defeat the Crusaders, because that naval advantage and having access to the sea already pretty devastating, as they essentially kind of cut, the Ottomans' empire in half there, right? Like, the Bayezid is now kind of more trapped in the Balkans, unable to fully move, I guess restricted from Anatolia, so already kind of cutting them in half, right? Again, so far the Crusaders are putting in the work.
Constantinople was resupplied with goods and additional troops. A small contingent of the Crusader navy sailed into the Black Sea and then into the Danube River to rendezvous with the main Crusader army. Back in the west, the main Crusader army under Sigismund crossed into the lands of Bayezid's vassal, the Tsardom of Vidin, through the coastal town of Oshova. After spending 8 days crossing over the Danube, the army found itself at the gates of the regional capital of Vidin. Seeing that a large Crusader army was at his gates, and witnessing the death of a Bulgarian monarch at the hands of Bayezid the previous year, Tsar Ivan Stratsimir of Vidin opened the gates of his kingdom to the Crusaders. What followed would be the massacre and imprisonment
Oh.
of the local Ottoman garrison in the capital town. During the aftermath of the bloody event, Stratsimir resupplied the Crusader army and gave Sigismund free passage into Ottoman Bulgaria through his realm. While the main
Okay, things are going pretty well so far, at least in the naval aspect, already kind of helping cripple the Ottomans. And now here, like, fortunately, he's managed to get into Bulgaria pretty easily without any major losses. So, again, Sigismund so far, I keep saying so far, is doing really well. We'll see.
Crusader army began its operations in the local region. The smaller Crusader force marching into Wallachia had also secured some gains of its own. The forces of the pro-Ottoman Wallachian usurper Vlad I had been pushed back into the eastern portions of Wallachia, while Mircea I regained his capital of Cotir de Argeș. This gave the Hungarian king access to large sections of the northern bank of the Danube, which would be vital in resupplying his vast mobile host, which marched on the opposite bank of the river. However, despite these early successes, not all would go as intended for the Crusader army.
Yeah, things are going a bit too smoothly there. I'm like waiting for the big setback, you know?
Tensions between the Western Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches had been ongoing since the days of the East-West Schism of 1054 and the Fourth Crusade of 1204. Both groups often saw the members of the opposing church as untrustworthy, and in some cases heretical, on par with Muslims. These sectarian tensions between the members of the two churches would rear their ugly heads during Sigismund's crusade. In the days following Vidin's submission, Crusader forces fanned out across the countryside of the Tsardom and plundered the region indiscriminately. As the main Crusader army marched east alongside the Danube, they arrived at the strongly fortified town of Oryahovo. Seeing that
But like I said last video, the thing is about the Crusades is that there's a lot of self-interest. Yeah, there's like, you know, there's usually a big goal, you know, take Jerusalem or defeat the Ottomans and whatnot. That's a big goal, but as we've seen in Crusades, that goal usually ain't enough to keep up with to actually keep them all completely on the same page. Because more often than not, with Crusades, like I said, there's self-interest. These are kings, these are rulers of their own nations, and they have their already previously established grudges and rivalries. You know what I mean? In a theological aspect, there's that he just mentioned, but there's also like pragmatism. Like we've seen some Crusader nations either pull out of the Crusades early or not fully commit because they don't trust their neighbors fully and want to keep strong. So again, like, sure, they have a big overall kind of uniting force, but it's usually not completely enough to make everyone on the same page 100%. And again, that division and that, that division and that previously established rivalries and bad blood usually always rear their ugly heads, which usually always helps cripple the Crusades in one sense or another. And so, yeah, Bayezid is definitely the underdog in this situation. He's fighting an uphill battle, but, you know, he is also fighting a divided enemy, and divide and conquer usually can always help, because if your enemy has its own issues, usually we see that even if they are numerically superior, there is advantages to be gained against them. So I imagine Bayezid's gonna have to pull off some great, Napoleonic-esque, skill, but he definitely does have an advantage.
The odds were heavily against them. The local Ottoman garrison of the town offered King Sigismund terms of surrender in return for their lives, and the lives of the Muslim populace of the town. The Hungarian king accepted the offer, as he had plans for the region after the crusade. However, after the surrender of the town, the Franco-Burgundian element of the Crusader army, in an act of open defiance, disregarded the terms of peace. The local Ottoman garrison was massacred, alongside the town's Muslim and Eastern Orthodox populace, much to the horror and frustration of Sigismund.
Again, he can't fully control them. Like, they have their own notions and ideas. Um, that's like, yeah, Sigismund's probably gonna have to fight out the rough way, like, yeah, we're not all completely on the same page, and we can't fully control a lot of this. He might be the overall leader, but even then, he does not have all the control over some of these guys. And we've seen this so many times in Crusades. Just people going AWOL and doing whatever they want, like... Yeah, you can't control them. Trying to direct them is the best he can try to do, but control is another factor that he can't have.
Despite the internal religious tension bubbling up within his army, King Sigismund continued towards the Ottoman fortress town of Nicopolis.
Yeah, the best he can do is try to move quickly and get through as much as he can.
In the year after its capture, the former Bulgarian capital had been strengthened with new fortifications and a well-supplied garrison led by Ottoman marcher lord Doğan Bey. The town stood on a high position overlooking the Danube and had been a vital ferry location for the Ottomans going into Wallachia. According to Sigismund, Nicopolis had to be captured if Christian rule were ever to return to Bulgaria. As a result, during the first weeks of September, the fortress of Nicopolis was put under siege. This time around, the Ottoman defenders stood their ground, for they had most likely heard about the brutal fates of their brethren in Vidin and Oryahovo. Seeing that Nicopolis would not surrender, the Crusader army constructed siege works and mines over the next few days, while supplies and reinforcements from Wallachia and the Crusader fleet arrived from the Danube. During the Crusaders' advance, the Sultan had been personally overseeing the blockade of Constantinople.
The Romans are holding on for dear life. This entire series is just them trying their hardest not to fall. And right now, we see they are just like, please help. Please move quicker.
Now he focused on the advancing enemy, and began mustering forces to confront his foe directly. Seeing that he had to strike the Crusader army before they could gain a significant foothold in Bulgaria, Bayezid gave out orders for his armies in the Balkans, including his vassal Stefan Lazarevich, to gather in Edirne and Plovdiv. The Sultan planned on catching the Crusader army off guard by assembling his army behind the Balkan mountains, far from the prying eyes of Crusader scouting parties, then force marching said army to Nicopolis.
Okay, Bayezid smart, realizing that he can't let the Crusaders just keep getting their foothold. Already looks bad enough with them having access to a good part of Wallachia, their fleet, and now moving deeper, already in Bulgaria, you know, Bulgarian land. So, this move is really smart. I think the terrain move right here, the geography of hiding his army, is a good move. Assemble as much as he can, be quick, and take out your enemy when they least expect it. Smart plan.
In the first weeks of September, Bayezid would leave a small force to continue the blockade of Constantinople, while he and his 20,000-strong Ottoman host began his march north to meet the forces of Sigismund. The Ottoman response to the crusade would be a swift one. In later centuries, it took an Ottoman army up to 6 weeks to assemble its ranks, and another 3 weeks to travel from Edirne to the Danube. However, completing this journey took the Thunderbolt only 2 weeks.
Holy crap. And again, we've kind of seen this in many other coalition battles against other great commanders, like Napoleon, for example. Being quick. Like, you have to be quick and catch your enemy off guard when they least expect it. And that's what he's doing. He's doing incredibly well, as you should, when you're fighting a coalition army. Be quick. Don't let them take the initiative away from your enemies. Be faster and strike them fast and hard. Again, Bayezid, I think, is doing everything right so far.
Much to the surprise and panic of the Crusaders, on the 22nd of September, Bayezid's host was spotted near Tarnovo by their scouting parties in the region. Only 2 days later, the Ottoman Sultan had established a war camp several kilometers south of Nicopolis. According to Ottoman chronicles, under the shroud of darkness, Bayezid rode to the walls of Nicopolis to inform the local Ottoman garrison of the arrival of his army. The Sultan promised Doğan Bey and his men that come the next day, he would shatter the Crusader army beneath the walls of their fortress. In retaliation for the sudden arrival of the Ottoman army at Nicopolis, thousands of the remaining Muslim prisoners from Vidin and Oyahovo were rounded up near the Crusader camp and executed. The gruesome struggle for Nicopolis had just begun.
Yeah, the Crusaders themselves can be incredibly brutal, as we've seen plenty of times. But again, they got caught with their pants down, essentially, right? Bayezid caught them off guard, and now they're gonna flounder, while Bayezid is ready to fight, like... yeah.
Even though they had defeated a minor Ottoman scouting party in the days before Bayezid's arrival, many in the Crusader camp were skeptical about how to approach their current situation. The Crusader host was now stuck between the local garrison of Nicopolis and Bayezid's large host, and worse still, they had the impassable Danube River to their rear. In one swift move, the Ottoman Sultan had managed to besiege the besiegers of Nicopolis. As a result of
Yeah, he completely took away the initiative. Like, look at this. Like, he caught them completely unawares, and now the Crusaders are completely floundering. Meanwhile, Bayezid has the initiative. And this just terrain is bad. Like, having your back already to the river is bad enough, but to an enemy garrison, if they choose to go out and fight Bayezid, another pretty bad overall position, you know? They got outmaneuvered hard.
Of their situation, a war council was called by Sigismund during the evening of the 24th of September. The decision to face the Ottoman host the following morning was agreed on. However, the Hungarian king advised to take a more cautious approach. He wanted the Wallachian and Transylvanian contingents of his army to head the Crusader assault, as they had the most experience in fighting against the Ottomans. After all, the veteran voivode, Mircea of Wallachia, had defeated Bayezid on 2 separate occasions in the years before the Crusade. Meanwhile, Sigismund also advised the Franco-Burgundian and Hungarian elements of the army to support the main attack in case of an Ottoman counterattack. This advice fell on deaf ears, as Sigismund's thoughtful strategy was ignored due to internal divisions within the Crusader camp once again resurfacing.
Again, man, that division, I think it's gonna come... We've seen it plenty of times with these crusades, but that might just come back to completely bite them in the butt, like, you know? And Sigismund, again, he's the leader, but these guys can just willy-nilly disobey him if they want, because they're also, like, you know, again, too many egos, too many big heads all in one, and that division, you know, is never optimal. Meanwhile, the Ottomans are united for one purpose. So, again, as we see, the forces with too much division never do well, or hardly ever do.
Many Franco-Burgundian leaders were outraged with Sigismund's plan, seeing it as dishonorable to enter battle behind the Wallachians and Transylvanians, whom they regarded as peasants. The Constable of France, Philippe of Artois, even accused the Hungarian monarch of trying to steal the honor and glory of the battle for himself. After many hours of shouting and fussing, Sigismund would cave in to the demands of the Franco-Burgundian leaders. Their Western knights would now head the Crusader assault.
It reminds me of the 100 Years' War when the Franco forces would just recklessly charge into enemies and just hope to win. That just kept going, and that's usually their only go-to, and sometimes they would get immediately wrecked. But yeah, again, as we cover kind of in that series, the French were very proud. And yeah, they didn't want to play ever second fiddle, you know? But, you know, I guess pride cometh before the fall. So yeah, I'm thinking Bayezid might pull off the win here. Because, you know, no one's listening to Sigmund's, who seems to actually know what he's doing for the most part.
You've earned this.
During the morning of September 25th, the numerically even Ottoman and Crusader armies...
Okay, so the Ottomans seem to have trenches here. Which, I'm just gonna speculate a bit. I don't know how this battle goes, other than I'm assuming Bayezid wins. I'm assuming that the French are going to just charge in the Franco forces, and then these the Ottoman cavalry here might pull back, and the French might get stopped by these trenches, and their momentum might... That's what I'm guessing. I would like to be right, but I don't know. We'll see.
Deployed for battle south of Nicopolis. On the Crusader side, the mounted Franco-Burgundian knights made up the first line, while King Sigismund and his mainly Hungarian contingent made up the second line behind them. Wallachian troops, led by Mircea, were stationed on the Crusader left wing, while Transylvanian troops, led by Stefan Lakfi, were stationed on the Crusader right wing. A small contingent of Crusaders was left behind to continue the siege on Nicopolis. Unlike their Crusader counterparts, the Ottoman army was far more centralized in its command structure. Ottoman Akinci light horsemen made up the front line, while behind them was a mix of irregular light infantry from Anatolia and the Balkans, called Azarbs. Behind them were Bayezid's household troops, also known as the Capiculu, which comprised several thousand elite Janissaries and Capiculu Sipahi heavy cavalry. They were led by the Sultan himself and his Grand Vizier Candilazade Ali Pasha. Meanwhile, the Ottoman right wing consisted of Balkan Timali Sipahi heavy cavalry, led by the Sultan's eldest son, Suleiman Çelebi. On the Ottoman left wing were the Anatolian Timali Sipahi heavy cavalry, led by Kara Timurtash Pasha. Lastly, on the extreme Ottoman left wing were the mounted Serbian knights, led by their prince, Stefan Lazarevic. In the hours leading up to the battle, King Sigismund sent scouting parties to locate Ottoman positions south of Nicopolis to find the camps Bayezid had concealed from the Crusaders. Due to this situation, the battle was delayed for another 2 hours, much to the annoyance of the Franco-Burgundian element of the army. Soon the waiting became too much for the Frenchmen to bear.
Oh my gosh.
Then a battle cry by Philippe of Artois was heard.
Again, this reminds me of the 100 Years' War. The French, they just kept charging in recklessly. Too hot-headed, you know? Am I gonna be right with my prediction? Because if I am, I'm gonna be really happy.
As he seized a banner of the Virgin Mary. "Forward in the name of God and St. George, today you shall see me a valorous knight." Before a general order to advance was given, Franco-Burgundian knights under their eager commanders unexpectedly charged forward to seek out the enemy themselves, much to the horror of many senior leaders in the Crusader camp.
Oh my gosh. Like, facepalm, right? Like, guys, no, this is a complete disaster.
After some time advancing forward, off in the distance, the Franco-Burgundian line spotted Ottoman Akinci light horsemen scouting their positions. Seeing an opportunity to gain glory on the battlefield, the mounted Western Knights of Europe proceeded to charge into the lightly armoured ranks of the Ottoman Akincis, resulting in heavy losses for the Muslims. With the remaining Akinci retreating back towards the Ottoman camp, and believing they had won a great victory, the Franco-Burgundian mounted knights continued moving forward to make contact with the main Ottoman line. However, as the knights continued riding forward, they encountered a steep slope topped by a forest of sharpened stakes. Behind the stakes lay the main Ottoman line of Azarbs, who were armed with various weapons such as axes, maces, bows and spears. Under immense arrow fire from the enemy, many knights dismounted from their horses to get through the Ottoman defences uphill, but many of the Franco-Burgundians were wounded alongside their steeds. Despite this, the poorly armoured Azarbs were no match against the mighty Knights of Europe, and many were killed in hand-to-hand combat.
Oh my gosh, but they are still super outnumbered though. Oh my gosh.
Seeing that this front line was in grave danger of collapsing, Bayezid ordered for his Tamali Sipahi heavy cavalry to hit the flanks of the Franco-Burgundian host, while his Janissaries reinforced the Ottoman front line. This stabilized the Ottoman line, but the fierce, bloody conflict for the slope continued, as the best knights of Western Europe went toe-to-toe with the Sultan's own elite troops.
You know, so far, I have to say that, yeah, I think this was still incredibly reckless and dumb for the French to do, but again, it's the medieval knight. They are still medieval knights, and we do know how powerful they are. So they are still really kind of being carried just by their skill, but even then, this is still an awful situation to be put in.
As the battle raged on, King Sigismund's contingent of the Crusader army, made up of infantry,
And meanwhile, they have to, like, flounder to catch up to these guys, right?
had finally arrived on the battlefield. Wanting to prevent the two Crusader contingents from uniting their forces at this critical moment in the battle, the now anxious Bayezid played his last hand. Sending forth his remaining Tamali Sipahi cavalry and the remnants of his Akinji and Azeb units, the Ottoman Sultan ordered the creation of a new battle line to be formed between the two Crusader hosts. Meanwhile, the Sultan's own Kapikulu Sipahi cavalry was sent forward to flank around and charged into the rear of the Franco-Burgundian.
The oldest trick in the book, the flank. This was smart though. Like, okay, already off the bat, Bayezid has separated, divide and conquer, man. That's how you do it. And this is how you win coalition wars. Look at Napoleon. And Bayezid, now look at Bayezid, like, essentially played on the division of the enemy, has divided them so they can't unify their full force, and immediately taking on one portion and moving on to the other, I assume.
Burgundian Knights. The latter move brought about heavy casualties for the Western Knights, as they were now surrounded on both sides by Bayezid's elite household troops. As the battle for the slope continued, the newly formed Ottoman line crashed into Sigismund's contingent of the Crusader army. Although taking heavy losses, the Ottoman line successfully prevented the Hungarian monarch from uniting his forces with the Franco-Burgundians, who were at this point in the battle exhausted after hours of fighting under the burning morning sun. With Sigismund unable to break through Ottoman lines to reach the Franco-Burgundians, panic began to spread in the Crusader army. Perhaps seeing the day was lost, and wanting to preserve their troops for future wars against the Ottomans, both Wallachian and Transylvanian contingents of the Crusader host began to withdraw from the battle. Before long, Sigismund's host was now stranded, and the remaining Franco-Burgundians were surrendering to Ottoman troops in droves.
Oh my
At this
gosh.
critical junction, Bayezid delivered the final blow of the battle. The Ottoman Sultan ordered his mounted Serbian knights, led by Stefan Lazarevic, to charge the flank of the remaining Hungarian.
The oldest trick in the book. In this cavalry charge, Stefan encountered his Crusader brother-in-law Nicopolis and assisted him in escaping from Ottoman captivity.
Army. The following Serbian charge would be decisive, as it left many dead on the battlefield, thus resulting in the complete rout of the remaining Crusader army. The remnants of Sigismund's army that survived the Ottoman onslaught made their way up north to the Danube, as Venetian and Genoese ships began preparations for evacuation operations. In full panic, many Crusaders drowned in the deep waters of the Danube,
Pacifico is
while the Hungarian king barely escaped with his own life as he was pushed into the river before being saved, dragged onto a local fishing vessel by his personal guard. On his way back to Hungary, Sigismund would place the blame for the Crusader defeat on the Franco-Burgundians, stating that their pride and vanity.
Rightfully so. I mean, granted, they were still in a really bad position. This entire operation was kind of in a already bad position. Like, the moment Bayezid caught them off guard and trapped there, through his 2-week forced march and whatnot, the Crusaders are already in a really bad position, like I've said. And, you know, this battle could have, I still think, been incredible. They maybe still could have lost, even if things had gone a bit better. But still, who knows? It's a bit iffy, I keep saying. But, again, they probably would have done much better had everyone followed Sigmund's lead. And, but they didn't. And again, the French, man, I keep saying this is like the frickin' 100 Years War we covered, where the French just kept charging in and losing. But yeah, the French made things even worse with that. They really handed Bayezid a much easier battle because of that. So again, they are the anti-MVP. They are the LVP? I'm gonna give them the LVP award.
He had cost them the day. The Battle of Nicopolis ended in a decisive Ottoman victory, and was the crowning achievement of Sultan Bayezid I's reign. Having suffered a few thousand casualties, the Ottoman Sultan had defeated and scattered a great European Crusader army in a single battle. The following morning after his victory, in retribution for the massacre of Muslim prisoners of Vidin and Oyahovo, the Thunderbolt ordered all those he had taken prisoner in the battle be killed. What followed would be a general massacre of thousands of Crusader soldiers, in which many were stripped of their clothing and decapitated. Only a handful of high-ranking noblemen were spared from the onslaught.
Following the battle, the Ottomans were said to profit greatly by ransoming the high-ranking European nobles they had captured. Yeah, again, the Crusaders and their violence kind of has come back to bite them, right? In that sense.
Such as John of Navarre. They were ransomed off to their respective European holdings in the following years. The defeat at Nicopolis caused a wave of shock around Europe, as for the first time, the wider continent was personally made aware of the impending threat of the Ottoman Sultanate. It would take half a century for European powers to recoup and launch another major crusade against Edirne.
Holy crap. So yeah guys, we're gonna end the video right here. But once again, man, Bayezid has overcome great odds. You have to give it to the man.